Hi, Jeff.
Tonight's Parsha class, Parsha Pump Up class, is sponsored by Jerry and Sheila Hermel in memory of Jerry's mother, Shandel Bas David. Our learning should be as chusva and neshama, and her neshama should have an aliyah going to the highest points in Gan Eden. I'd like to tonight discuss something that is an extremely important topic that is not something that is discussed in this week's Parsha, but it is obvious and prevalent in this week's Parsha. In this week's Parsha, Tazria, Metzora, we learn the laws of someone who's afflicted with tzaras. Tzaras can present itself in different ways. It could present itself as white spots on your body, tzaras beguf, on your body, on the person themselves. It could present itself on your clothing, on your material objects. You find these white spots. It could present itself on a person's home. That's another type of tzaras, affliction. And the Torah in this week's Parsha discusses the laws if someone is afflicted with this punishment of tzaras, this impurity of tzaras, and the laws pertaining to what one does if they find themselves in such a predicament, suffering from tzaras. And then the Torah in the following Parsha, it's a double Parsha, in Parsha Metzora, talks about how one would come out of this impure state, how they go through the purification process after having been afflicted with tzaras. Now, how does one get tzaras? So the Gemara in Erchin, on Daf Yodalid, goes through the different ways that one gets tzaras. One way in particular, it's discussed at the end of the Gemara in Sukkah. The Gemara tells us how one would get tzaras if they are stingy. Stinginess would result in someone getting tzaras. But probably the most famous of all of the prohibitions, all of the terrible transgressions that one would commit in order to get the punishment and the affliction of tzaras is that of Lashon, Hara, evil speech. Now, I specifically use the language of evil speech. Most people translate colloquially Lashon Hara as gossip, which basically what it is it's talking about people. You know, there are different types of Lashon Hara. There is Lashon Hara that is, straight lying about someone, spreading rumors that are not true, and even spreading truthful things that may hurt a person's reputation. There is even some level of Lashon Hara, it's called Avak Lashon Hara, that is both true and would not necessarily hurt a person's reputation. You did not intend on doing that, but because of the way you said it, it's kind of like a backhanded way of giving them a compliment, maybe. Or even giving them a sincere compliment that could be misconstrued as something that's negative. There are different types of Lashon Hara, and Lashon Hara is something that, as I said before, is evil. It is absolutely evil. You know, the Chafetz Chaim, Rabbi Meir Kagan, passed away in 1933. He was, saying that he was the Gadol Ador is not sufficient when describing the Chafetz Chaim. The Chafetz Chaim was the centurion. He was the rabbinic figure over for sure, the last 100 years, if not more. The Chafetz Chaim represented both a really like what the koach ha'adam is, what the power of individuals have in self-growth, self-perfection, in helping others. The Chafetz Chaim revolutionized the way that we help other people. And one of the major contributions that he made, which is what his name is based off of, what his nickname is from the book that he put together called Sefer Chafetz Chaim. The book about the laws of Lashon Hara. And what the Chafetz Chaim did was something revolutionary, where he created a popular Jewish idea. He popularized the idea of watching the things that come out of our mouth. Before the Chafetz Chaim, it was a major issue that people were speaking Lashon Hara, they were gossiping, they were talking about each other, and it's an absolutely evil thing. I'll just point out something. You know that if one speaks Lashon Hara and they spread false rumors about another person, you know that potentially they have violated 31 prohibitions in the Torah? 31 prohibitions in the Torah. Eating a ham and cheese would not be as bad. 31 prohibitions in the Torah. I'm not suggesting someone go eat a ham and cheese. I'm also not suggesting that someone speak Lashon Hara. Speaking Lashon Hara is a heinous crime. A heinous crime. What was so revolutionary about the Chavetz Chaim was not, and what was so incredible about his contribution was not, letting us into the world of the legal acumen of the Chavetz Chaim. It wasn't his ability to analyze a prohibition in the Torah. What was so revolutionary about what Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan did was that he unveiled the mask of gossip into being something that is pure evil. Pure evil, speaking about other people. Rav Pam Zatzal. Rav Pam was the Rosh Yeshiva of Torah V'das in Brooklyn. He was, one of the Gedolei Yisrael in the 90s. And Rav Pam was once asked by his students, what is the number one, most, horrifying, I don't want to say horrifying, probably a better word to say most revered and serious and fearful and scary moment during the high holiday season? What's the moment during the high holiday season that we have to be trembling the most during, that we have to take most seriously? What's that moment? Because the students were thinking to themselves, different ideas. Like, for example, the Kabbalists speak about that when the Chazan at the beginning of Shachris says, HaMelech, that in heaven, the malachim are shaking. Like that moment when we summon the king to begin the coronation ceremony, like that moment there are rebbes that have fainted during that moment, or during the Musaf repetition of the Shmona Esrei when the Chazan is saying Kedusha, and he gets up to the point in Kedusha where that during that moment is a trembling moment that a person needs to feel to their core the seriousness of the day, the awesomeness of the day of the high holidays. So they asked Rav Pam, what is the number one moment during the high holiday season that one should be trembling the most during? So Rav Pam said, you know what the most scary moment during the high holiday season is? The break. Why? Because what's the first thing that happens during the break? People now have an opportunity to talk. And what unfortunately happens during the break? Man, that Chazan, what a windbag. Man, that guy thinks he can just, come on, let's get through the service already. That rabbi, that young rabbi they brought, that new assistant rabbi, what is that? Who is that? Who does he think he is talking to us, telling us how to live our lives? Well, what are the things coming out of that guy's mouth? Who does he think he is? Did you see his tie was messed up? How embarrassing. He was giving a drasha, and how embarrassing his tie was messed up. The very first moment we have to talk, human nature is such that we talk about each other. Said Rav Pam, that moment, the break, is the scariest moment during the high holiday season. There are two Rambams that I just now, as I was saying, there are two Rambams. I got chills because I'm scared to even share what the Rambam says in his Mishnah Torah, where he codifies all Jewish law. And as Reb Chaim Soloveitchik said, every single word that's in the Rambam's Mishnah Torah is of halachic value, of value of Torah law. It carries weight. Every single word that's in the Rambam. There are two Rambams in the Mishnah Torah that I'm even nervous to share just because of how scary they are. One Rambam, he writes in Perek Daled of Hilchos Tshuva. The Rambam writes that there are 5 averos that are very, very difficult to do tshuva for, if not impossible to do tshuva for. Guess one of the 5 that's on the list, Lashon Hara. And there's a great mashal that has been given over the years, that there's a tradition in Klal Yisrael to say over this mashal, this parable, to explain, to illustrate why one can't do tshuva for Lashon Hara. They tell a story of a yeshiva student who wanted to do tshuva for Lashon Hara. So his Rebbe tells him that, yeah, it's amazing you want to do tshuva for Lashon Hara. Great, here's what you do. You go take a pillow, a feather that's full of feathers. On a very, very windy day, go up to the top of the yeshiva. I'll make sure the maintenance guy lets you onto the roof. You take the pillow during that very, very windy day. You break it over the chimney, over the exhaust of the yeshiva, and then come back to me when you're done. Okay. Sounds simple enough to do. So the boy does. He takes the pillow, there's the feathers. He goes up to the roof. He breaks the pillow against the roof. The feathers fly everywhere. He sees them with the wind gushing, and he's thinking to himself, oh, fantastic. It's a really windy day. I'm really doing it in the most mehudar way, in the best way possible. I see all the feathers flying. So he goes back to the Rebbe. He says, I did it. Is that it? I did my tshuva for Lashon Hara. The Rebbe says, no. You have one more thing you have to do. That's it. Just one more thing. Oh, one more. I can do one more thing. No problem. The first one was so easy. This is so. One more thing. Sure. What should I do, Rebbe? Go and pick up every single feather. Then you've done tshuva for Lashon Hara. Because what Lashon Hara does, it spreads. Like feathers on a windy day. It just goes everywhere. And in order to properly do tshuva, you have to go pick up every single feather. This was a point of contention, I should just tell you. That when the Sefer Chafetz Chaim was being printed, when the Chafetz Chaim, Rav Yisrael Meir Kagan, finished writing this revolutionary work, so he brought it to the different Gedolim to get their approbations, to different rabbis to get their haskama for the work, which is a minhag in Klal Yisrael that we've had for a very long time. They already come from the times of from the Shla and even further back, that there's a minhag in Klal Yisrael that we go and get approbations before we publish any Torah work. So the Chafetz Chaim went to one of the greatest Torah scholars of the time, and not just one of the greatest Torah scholars of the time, but a person who had focused his energy in training others in the area of self-perfection, which of course is a prerequisite for preventing oneself from speaking Lashon Hara. He went to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter. Rabbi Yisrael Salant, who was a revolutionary in the area of training people in self-perfection, in learning the area of Musar. So he goes to Rabbi Yisrael Salanter to ask him for an approbation. And Rabbi Yisrael Salanter looks through the work and he says, I'm sorry, but I can't give you haskama. I can't give you an approbation. Why not? I assume that this was, please, if there's a mistake I made, tell me what the mistake is. So he says, well, there is a mistake that you made. You write in the book that if one spoke Lashon Hara about another person, so to do teshuvah, one would have to go over to that person to ask forgiveness. So says Rabbi Yisrael Salanter that I think that's a mistake. I don't think that one should. So what do you mean? How could you not? If I spoke Lashon Hara against you, so I need to ask forgiveness. Why is that a mistake? So Rabbi Yisrael Salanter explained to him because of two things. Number one, what's the problem with speaking Lashon Hara? We'll get to different issues as to why it's so evil a little bit later. But what's one major issue with Lashon Hara? That you're creating divides amongst Klal Yisrael. You're creating separations. That you're creating bad blood, right? So if I go over to a person who had no clue that I spoke Lashon Hara about them, and I go over to the person and I say, listen, I hate to, it's before Yom Kippur. I'm doing some introspection. I realize I've made mistakes, like everyone's made mistakes, but I have mistakes that I carry with me. I got skeletons in my closet, and one of them is the fact that I speak a lot of Lashon Hara about you. I just can't help myself. You're such an easy target. Like I apologize. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. You know what that person's going to do to me? He's going to slap me in the face. If I go over to the person and I tell them that I spoke Lashon Hara about them, says Rabbi Salanter, you might be risking the thing you're trying to prevent. You might be risking creating more divides amongst Klal Yisrael, more separations, more cuts amongst you, and therefore better that you don't go over to apologize. But then Rabbi Salanter said further. He said, okay, so you went over to this person to apologize. Have you undone your deed? No, because Lashon Hara spreads like a wildfire. It's like the feather in the wind. There's no way to catch it. Once it's done, it's done. And that's why the Rambam says it's one of the hardest averos to do tshuva for. But then there's a scarier Rambam. The Rambam says, and I'm nervous to even share it, but the Rambam says, when discussing the three cardinal sins, the three most heinous crimes that one could commit. What are the three most heinous crimes that one could commit? Gili al rayos, sexual immorality, avodah zara, idolatry, and shvichat damim, murder, shvichas dam. Murder, idolatry, sexual immorality, these are the three most heinous crimes that one could commit, to the point that one would have to give their life before committing those crimes. Someone takes a gun to my head and says, go kill that person, I have to take the bullet. Someone takes a gun to my head and says that I have to eat a cheeseburger, you know what I do? I eat the cheeseburger. But when it comes to the three averos, I have to take the bullet. But then the Rambam says the four scariest words in the entire Mishnah Torah. He says, V'lashon hara keneged kulam. Lashon hara is tantamount to all of them. It's the worst of the worst. V'lashon hara keneged kulam. It's the worst of the worst. There's a similar comment by the Rabbeinu Yonah. It's also a Tosos in Maseches Sotah Daf Yud, that the Rabbeinu Yonah says that that the three cardinal sins, those three major averos that one could commit, that God forbid one commits, that you got to have your life before committing, they present themselves in different forms. Like, for example, another form of avodah zara. So the Gemara in Psachim says that another form of idolatry would be using idolatry for your benefit, like taking medicine from a certain tree that people worship that tree and serve it and use it as a god. If you were to take that medication that comes from that tree or from that plant, so then one would start thinking that that deity is what's healing them, and therefore the Gemara says you can't take that medicine. Says the Rabbeinu Yonah, would be a subset of the prohibition of murder? Would be an offshoot of the prohibition of murder? Speaking Lashon Hara. Speaking Lashon Hara. Why? Because you're malabim pnei chavero. You can potentially destroy a person's life by speaking about them. The Gra, the Vilna Gaon, the Rebbe of Chaim Volozhin, who founded the Volozhin Yeshiva, the Gra was unbelievable. They say that that the Gra throughout his life kept a record of every single time he wasted a minute. And every single time he wasted a minute, he would take a dot and put it in his notebook. Just one dot in the notebook across the page. At the end of his life, you know how many pages were filled in the notebook? 2. If I were to do that, I would need libraries in order to fit all the books that I filled up from putting my dots in the book. The Gra, 2 pages. This is who we're talking about. The Vilna Gaon said that the chelek a person gets, the portion a person gets in Olam Haba, is dependent upon how much Lashon Hara they spoke. Everything else, you can do tshuva, you can make up for it. Lashon Hara, your portion in the world to come is dependent on the Lashon Hara one spoke. I mean, think of any other avera or any other prohibition in the Torah that has a punishment associated with it. Is there anything more obvious than saras? Is there anything more obvious? You imagine when you wake up in the morning, you go to brush your teeth, you wash your face, you're half asleep, you take the water, you wash your face, you look in the mirror, whoa, you have this big white spot smack in the middle of your head. Is there anything more obvious, more glaring of God is screaming at you, you fool? Look at what you've done. You go to get dressed in the morning, you open up your closet, you see on your brand new suit, on your brand new blouse, smack a big white stain. You try taking it out with every OxyClean and every single type of bubby concoction of a way to get out a stain, and you take, but nothing is getting the stain out of your suit or out of your blouse. Is there any greater message of God screaming at you, you fool, look at what you've done? With that introduction, why is it that Lashon Hara is so bad? What's so bad about it? So I spoke a little bit of gossip. I made a mistake. I shouldn't have spoken about you, but I did speak about you. It's such commonplace, unfortunately, but it is commonplace. No one, you ask a random person on the street, a random person in society, you ask them, what's worse? What's worse? Is it worse for me to murder a person or speak gossip? Is it worse for me to commit sexual immorality or speak gossip? And yet the Rambam tells us, the Lashon Hara keneged kulam. What is so horrible about Lashon Hara, that it's so evil? Like the Chafetz Chaim had removed the mask of Lashon Hara being just gossip to being something evil. What is so horrible about Lashon Hara? So I'd like to present 3 reasons why God hates Lashon Hara so much. The first we already spoke about a little bit, that it creates divisions amongst Klal Yisrael, that we are supposed to be a nation that has unity, a nation that has oneness, that has withstood at the most important moment in Jewish history to accept the Torah. We stood ki ish echad, b'lev echad, as one person, one body, one heart, one soul. That we are a nation that emphasizes the importance of unity. And it's only in our unity that we have strength. And we know, as the Gemara tells us and our rabbis teach us, that it's only through our unity that we'll even get the Mashiach. That without that oneness, without that achdus, that we are just a scattered nation. As it says in the Megillah, Am mefurad mefuzar, that we are just a scattered nation. The hallmark of Klal Yisrael is achdus. That's what we're striving for. Lashon Hara rips it apart. Lashon Hara makes divides and separations amongst Klal Yisrael. The Chafetz Chaim points out that it's no coincidence that part of the tahara, part of the purification process for tzaras, is the need to go to the Kohen. That when one has tzaras, they wake up in the morning and God forbid they find this white spot on them. So you don't go to the doctor, you don't go to Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't go to Aaron HaKohen, you go to Aaron HaKohen. You don't go to Moshe Rabbeinu, you don't go to a big Talmid Chacham, you don't go to Yoshua. Who do you go to? You go to Aaron HaKohen, you go to the Kohanim. Why do you go to the Kohanim? Because what do the Kohanim represent? As the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us in Perek Aleph, Mishnah Yud Beis, Havim mitalmidim shel Aaron HaKohen, that we are supposed to act like the students of Aaron. Ohev shalom v'rodev shalom, that we're supposed to love peace, run after peace. That Aaron HaKohen, the symbol of Kohanim, is togetherness, bringing Klal Yisrael together. The Ohev Shalom and the Rodev Shalom. Therefore, says the Chafetz Chaim, it's no coincidence that one is commanded when they find saras on their body to go to the Kohen in order for the Kohen to paskin on it, in order for the Kohen to begin the Tahara process, to begin the purification process. Because you need to be able to look the Kohen in the face when he looks at your tzaras, because it's the Kohen that represents togetherness in Klal Yisrael, and through the Lashon Hara, you made separations. No other impurity is one obligated to be sent chutz lamachana, out of the camp. That if someone is afflicted with tzaras, they are obligated and they are told you have to leave the camp. Because if you're going to continue to be here, there's a risk of you continuing to make separations in Klal Yisrael. Therefore, until you are rid of your tzaras, you need to leave the camp. It's part of the punishment. You have to leave the camp. You need to be separated the same way you made divisions. And more than that, you need to leave the camp because God forbid you're going to influence others to talk gossip and continue to make those divides within Klal Yisrael. You know that when someone is afflicted with tzaras, we change their name. Let's say someone had the name of Eli, and Eli spoke tzaras. So during the spoke Lashon Hara, while Eli is afflicted with tzaras, so his name changes from Eli to Tameh. His name becomes Tameh. Why? So the Gemara tells us two reasons. Why is it that his name changes from Eli, or let's say Tom? Hi, what's your name? Tom. No, I'm sorry, call me Tameh. Right? Why is it that he's called Tameh? Because of two reasons. One is so that people know to daven for him. Because the person is afflicted with this ailment, this spiritual ailment, and therefore we have to pray on that person's behalf. That's number one. Number two is so that I pray for you from a distance. I don't get too close. Once I know that you are someone who has tzaras, I know I have to stay away, lest you influence me inappropriately. Lest you influence me to also create divides amongst Klal Yisrael. We have to separate from those people. Because we as a people need to stick together. Which is why the Nefesh HaChaim writes, Rav Chaim Volozhiner, the main student of the Vilna Gaon. In fact, by the way, why is it that Rav Chaim Volozhiner was referred to as the main student of the Vilna Gaon? It's because the Vilna Gaon's own children said that even more than us, Rav Chaim Volozhiner was the one who understood our father and learned the most from him. Rav Chaim Volozhiner, the main student of the Vilna Gaon, the founder of the Volozhin Yeshiva, writes in the Nefesh HaChaim, the Gemara says that someone who is afflicted with tzaras, a Metzora is chashuv kimes. It's as if they're dead. It's as if they're non-existent. The Nefesh HaChaim explains, Rav Chaim Volozhiner explained, because what defines chiyus? What defines a person being alive? The ability to help others. That's what defines a person being alive. That a living person is someone who can go and assist others, can go and be there for others. It brings people together. It brings a society together. That's the definition of a living person, says the Nefesh HaChaim. And therefore, a Metzora who made the divides amongst Klal Yisrael, it's chashuv kimes. As if you're not even alive. Because you're doing the exact opposite of why a person was even created, which is to help others. The second reason why God hates Lashon Hara so much is because speech, the ability to talk, is a very unique gift that God gave people as opposed to any other species. That people are given a unique ability to speak. Like the Pasuk tells us during Maisa Bereshis, during creation, the Torah tells us that when God created man, V'nishma ba'apo ruas chayim, that God blew into man a living soul, a nishmas chayim. What is that? I'm sorry, a ruach chayim, a living spirit. What is that? So the Onkelos translates ruach chayim as ruach memalala. What's ruach memalala? The ability to speak. The ability to speak is what makes us unique as people. Why? Because through speech, it's a very unique thing. It allows me to either lift people up or bring people down. Speech is something very unique in that I could speak ideas or I could speak about people. I can create good things. I can use my speech to help others or to bring people down, to destroy others. It's very unique to people. And it's a very unique gift that God has given us. And therefore, if I use my speech to speak about other people, it's like I'm showing God, I'm using the special gift, the uniqueness that you gave me for the exact opposite purpose, for the most negative purpose I can. It's like taking the present and throwing it back in God's face. You know, the Nesiva Shalom, the Slonim Rebbe, you know, Rav Shach, who was the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, was not a chassid by any means. He was not Hasidic. He was Litvish as they come. But Rav Shach, the Rosh Yeshiva of Panovich, said that the Sefer Nesiva Shalom, which was written by the Slonim Rebbe, a Hasidic sefer, is the Mesilas Yesharim of our generation. It is the guide to proper Jewish outlook and Jewish growth and growth in our relationship with God. It is the guide for our generation. The Nesiva Shalom writes, he says that part of what God hates about Lashon Hara is that, you know, we are all the children of God. We are like, as God views us, as like each one of us as like his firstborn child. That's the way God looks at our relationship with him. And each one of us are his children. So it says in the Nesiva Shalom, imagine you're in shul and you hear the person behind you talking and you hear them saying, you know what I saw, you know, that person's kid do? And you hear them talking about your kid. You hear them talking about your loved one in a negative way. How are you ever going to be able to look at that person the same way again? You talk about my kid. Get out of here. I don't want to have anything to do with you anymore. It says in Nesiva Shalom, that's what you're doing. When you use that gift that God gives you to talk about his kids, what are you doing? I don't want to see you right now. Get out. Go chutz l'machane. I don't want to have anything to do with you right now. How could you speak about my kid like that? Rabbi Saul said it's like you're taking your words and you're making it meaningless. So you're taking the special gift that God gave you and you're making it something that has no meaning, which, by the way, we have the ability, even with our speech, to create things. I'll give you an example. You know, there's a concept in the Torah called a neder and a shvuah, where you can take an oath, where through my taking an oath, I can actually create realities. Let's say I take an oath. I'm not saying I'm going to take this oath, but I take an oath that I'm swearing off M&Ms. That's it. The dentist told me no more M&Ms. And therefore, I'm going to make a neder. I'm going to make an oath, a vow right now. I'm no longer going to eat M&Ms. And M&Ms to me are like hektish. It's like something I cannot eat according to Torah law. You know that if I eat those M&Ms, it's like I'm eating chazer. It's treif. It's mamish treif. I created a reality through my speech. And we use those same words to do things that are meaningless. It's like you're taking your words and you're making it meaningless. You know, one of my teachers, Rabbi Ari Marcus, he has three brothers. Then the four of them opened a yeshiva together in Israel. I was a student in that yeshiva. It's called Reich at Yerushalayim. And when they were younger, so Rav Ari Marcus, who is the oldest of the bunch, was already from a young age someone who was very engrossed in Torah and learned a lot of Torah. So one time his parents were Rabbi and Rebbitzin in Staten Island, New York. So his parents went away for a Shabbos one time, and their grandmother came to to watch the boys. And, the boys, they had friends over and they had a big Friday night meal with, a bunch of guys and, 4 boys in the house. There's 1 girl in the house, and, a bunch of kids came over and they all had a Friday night dinner together. And in the middle of the meal, well, as usually happens, unfortunately, there's some Lashon Hara that's going on. There's some gossip that's taking place at the table. And Ari at the time, in the middle of the whole conversation, he spits the food out of his mouth and he says, oh my gosh, Bubby, why'd you buy treif chicken? This chicken is treif. Why would you serve us treif chicken? So she looks at him and says, what are you crazy? What are you talking about? I bought it from the butcher. I'll show you the receipt. I'll show you the package. I'll show you the hechsher. What are you talking about, treif chicken? It's perfectly kosher. What are you doing, Ari? And at this point, the entire table is silent and everyone's kind of laughing at him. What are you talking? And he looks at everybody, says, eating treif chicken would be 1 prohibition of the Torah. Speaking Lashon Hara is 31. And at that point, the conversation obviously ended. But this is what we do when we speak Lashon Hara. We're taking this special gift that God gave us and we're throwing it back in his face to do the most heinous things with. The students of the Chazon Ish, of Avram Yishai Karelitz, the leader of the Orthodox community in Israel in the 1940s and 50s. He passed away in 1953. So the Chazon Ish's students, unfortunately, the Chazon Ish and his wife, Avram Yishai Karelitz, they never had any children. They were never blessed to have any children. So in their home, though, was always filled with yeshiva students. The Chazon Ish was never a Rosh Yeshiva of a yeshiva, but he was kind of like the tate. He was like the father of all the yeshiva students. And those students that were either a little bit more troubled or had issues at home, the Karelitzes basically like adopted and took in these kids, these yeshiva students. And they, would ask them different questions and things of that nature. And they would spend a lot of time in the house. So the students once asked the Chazon Ish, they say, we want to start working on our Lashon Hara, not speaking about others. And we assumed that the best place to start would be learning the Sefer Chafetz Chaim. But then another one of the friends suggested, Joey suggested that instead of going straight to the work of the Chafetz Chaim, maybe we should go back to the original sources, learn through Parshas Metzora, go through the Gemara and Erechin, and go back to the original sources, maybe, and someone else suggested maybe we should learn the laws found in the Rambam first about Lashon Hara. And we just want to ask the Rebbe, you, Rabbi Karelitz, Rabbi Avram Shai Karelitz, the Chazon Ish, we want to ask you, Rebbe, what would you suggest is the best way to learn the laws of Lashon Hara? And the Chazon Ish looked at them and he said, I don't understand. Why do you have to learn the laws of Lashon Hara? What do you mean, Rebbe? Yeah? Like as if the Rebbe doesn't know how serious the prohibitions of Lashon Hara are. What do you mean? Why wouldn't we have to learn the prohibitions of Lashon Hara? And they kind of looked at him like very puzzled. And he says, why would you have to learn the prohibitions of Lashon Hara? So now they kind of figured out that he's obviously getting to somewhere. And they kind of said, cut to the chase. What do you mean we don't have to learn the laws of Lashon Hara? Why not? So the Chazon Ish said, because the laws of Lashon Hara are very simple. Don't speak about other people. That's it. Those are all the laws. All the laws of Lashon Hara is don't speak about other people. Rav Yosef Shalom Eliashiv Zatzal, who was the Gadol Ador in Mei Sha'arim, Rav Eliashiv was unbelievable. He himself was a grandson of the Lashon. Rav Eliashiv, his grandfather, had written a book on Kabbalah that at the age of 18 years old, Rav Eliashiv helped his grandfather writing this very intricate work on Kabbalah, edited the work for his grandfather at the age of 18 years old. In fact, received acknowledgments in the introduction to the work that the author, the Leshem, writes, I want to thank my grandson. Yosef Shalom for helping me in this accomplishment of writing this Kabbalistic work, the Sefer Lashon. The Rav Elyashiv was unbelievable. I think the most unbelievable part about Rav Elyashiv was how normal he was despite his greatness. The very normal person. He was someone that you could approach. I myself had the privilege of going to Rav Elyashiv many times to get blessings from Rav Elyashiv. I have the privilege of having a personal relationship with the closest student of Rav Elyashiv, Rabbi Sion Cook, who was very close to Rav Elyashiv, was his right-hand man for 30 years. Unfortunately, Rav Elyashiv passed away back in 2012. But when Rav Elyashiv was sitting Shiva for his wife was the daughter of Rav Aryeh Levine, the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, and his daughter was Rebbetzin Elyashiv. And when Rav Elyashiv was sitting Shiva for his wife, I'll tell you a quick story about his wife and how the magnitude of the greatness and the righteousness that was Rebbetzin Elyashiv, that unfortunately Rebbetzin Elyashiv suffered at the end of her life due to lung cancer. And in the last few days of her life, so their daughter, who is married to Reb Chaim Kanievsky, Reb Chaim Kanievsky is Rav Elyashiv's son-in-law. So Rebbetzin Batsheva Kanievsky had moved into the Elyashiv home in order to be with her mother to help in the house, being that her husband, her father, were the Gedolei Yisrael, and therefore their time was being consumed. Of course, Rav Elyashiv's main priority was to take care of his wife, but his wife wanted him to make sure to take care of the klal. That's the type of couple that they were, the type of people that they were. And his daughter as well wanted to make sure that her father can continue, Rav Elyashiv can continue to take care of Klal Yisrael by answering the questions and learning for 18, 20 hours a day as he was accustomed to for, basically like 80 years of his life. So in order to keep that up, Rebbetzin Kanievsky moved into the home during those last days. And there was one evening, Rebbetzin Kanievsky heard her mother coughing a lot, nonstop. And it was a very harsh cough. And so she gets up and she goes to her parents' bedroom to go check on her mother and noticed that her mother was not in bed. So she starts looking, trying to follow the sounds of the cough, trying to find her mother, and notices her mother standing on the merpeset outside on their porch in Yerushalayim, and sees her mother coughing and says, "Mama, what are you doing here? You should go back inside." She says to her daughter, "Batshevala, I don't want to go inside because I know that my coughing is going to end up waking up your father. And if I wake him up, then he's not going to have the same energy to learn tomorrow and answer the questions for Klal Yisrael properly with the right headspace if he doesn't get the amount of sleep that he needs. So I figure it's better for me to go outside and cough in order to not wake him up." It was just a few days later, unfortunately, that she passed away. And at the Shiva, Rav Elyashiv, of course, it was a house full. And in the middle of the Shiva, there was that classic song in they play in like Sesame Street. I remember listening to when I was a kid. One of these things is not like the other. One of them doesn't belong, right? And there was someone at the Shiva house that walked in that just seemed like did not belong. Where, as you could imagine, in the home of the Shiva house of Rav Elyashiv, the Gadol Ador, you have Torah scholars, you have students from different yeshivas, you have people that are focused on religious values, and then in walks someone who just does not look the part. He was someone who was wearing baggy shorts and, had tattoos and just did not that means that they're a bad person, just didn't seem to play the part. So he comes in, he walks straight up to Rav Elyashiv, and people are kind of looking at him like it just kind of like took everybody by surprise. Like, what's this person doing here? He walks straight over to Rav Elyashiv while he's in Avelis. He says to me, "I have a message from your wife. She wants to report that the reason Mashiach has not come yet is because people don't care enough about one another, and they speak too much Lashon Hara." He then turned around and left. So now everybody kind of is, what is going on? So they look at Rav Elyashiv, and I know someone who was there that witnessed this. I know someone who was there that witnessed this. They go over to Rav Elyashiv and they say, what was that about? So Rav Elyashiv says, my wife and we made a deal when she fell ill. We made a deal that whichever one of us would pass away first would come back to and send a messenger from the Beis Din Shalmala, from the heavenly court, to give a report to the other one why Mashiach has not arrived yet.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
I know someone who was there that witnessed it. Unfortunately, this is what Klal Yisrael is facing, that we unfortunately still continue to make these divides. We continue to use the gift that God has given us to spread evil by speaking negatively about one another. There's that famous quote from Eleanor Roosevelt that, big people talk about ideas, average people speak about things, and small people speak about people. And I want to just end with an amazing medrash. The medrash tells a story that there was a peddler, there was a rochel, who was going throughout town saying that I have the Sam HaChaim, I have the elixir of life that come by from me like a used car salesman, right? I got the best deal you can imagine. I have the elixir of life, the secret to life. This is what I'm selling. So you have people coming over, seeing what the person's selling. And there was Rabbi Yanai. Rabbi Yanai was one of the Gedolei Hador. And Rabbi Yanai was sitting in his home learning Torah when this peddler shows up to town. And usually something like this would not catch, Rabbi Yanai's attention. What does he need to be involved with this? Like, it's really like a used car salesman, a peddler. So, but for whatever reason, Rabbi Yanai says to his student who is sitting with him, go get that peddler. I'd like to see what he's selling. I'd like to make sure that he's not scamming the town. So the student goes, he gets the peddler comes in and he says, no, Rabbi Yanai, you don't need what I'm selling. Like as if he's trying to hide it from him. So now he kind of piqued his interest a little bit. Like, what are you trying to hide from me? Like, just show me, what are you selling? So he opens up a book of Tehillim, the peddler, and he points to a pasuk. The very first pasuk, one of the very first psukim in Tehillim. Mi ha'ish hachafetz chaim. That who is the person who runs after life? Someone who is careful with the things that come out of their mouth. Someone who is careful with the things that come out of their life, that is the shomer piv. Someone who watches the things they say, that's the elixir of life. The Medrash says that Rabbi Yanai was obviously very impressed with the peddler. But Rabbi Yanai said that until the peddler showed me that pasuk, I never knew it before. What does that mean? Rabbi Yanai never went through Tehillim. Rabbi Yanai doesn't know a very basic pasuk in Tehillim. He never seen it before. He doesn't know it. He doesn't know that it says in Sefer Tehillim that a person the key to a successful life is watching the things that come out of your mouth. I mean, that's just, for someone like Rabbi Yanai, that should be like something very basic. How could that be? Because what the peddler did is that he showed Rabbi Yanai that in order to watch the things that come out of your mouth, the solution is not don't talk. You could be a peddler. You could be a used car salesman. Your entire living, your entire livelihood, your entire being could be a talker. Someone who speaks, someone who schmoozes. But it's about using your speech properly. It's not about not talking. It's about using your speech properly. We, as a people, need to reflect on this doctrine, this very evil and very terrible thing that is speaking Lashon Hara, as the Rambam had pointed out to us, that Lashon Hara Keneged Kulam, it is potentially the worst of all of the Averos. It's incumbent upon us to reflect on this doctrine of Lashon Hara and reflect on the way that we speak. That even if we accept upon ourselves just one day a week, 1 hour a day, to make sure that I'm going to watch the things that come out of my mouth. How different our lives would be, how many less separations we would make amongst one another. And as Rav Elyashiv had told us, and has been a tradition through amongst Klal Yisrael for generations, that Amir Tashem, through watching the things that come out of our mouth, of making sure that we prevent Lashon Hara, that should be the key to bring the Geula Shlema, to bring Mashiach Tzidkenu, B'mheira B'yameinu Amen.
Amen.
Okay.
Thank
If anyone
you.
has questions, I'm happy to stay on for a few minutes.